Hello, everyone. Today is Wednesday, September 15th, and this is the Cluster API office hours. Cluster API is a sub-project of SIG Cluster Lifecycle. As always, please make sure that you're following the CNCF Code of Conduct, be respectful to everyone, and if you'd like to speak, you can use the raise hand feature in Zoom, which is now placed under reactions, I believe. And if you can, please add your name to the attendee list, as well as any topics that you might have that you want to discuss, or any questions or anything like that in the agenda and their discussion topics. All right. Before we get started, do we have anyone who's new to this meeting, hasn't been here before, and just wants to introduce themselves, say hi, and just tell us a bit about why they're here?
Hi, yes, my name is Sebastian Greisen. I'm an engineer at Twilio. I'm on the agenda today, just going to do an early demo of an in-house cluster API provider we're working on for bare metal called Cluster API Provider Live. Just looking for some early feedback and opinions.
Awesome, thanks. Welcome, Sebastian. Anyone else? Oh, Tilo? Is it Tilo or we can't hear you, you're muted.
All right, is it better?
Yes.
All right, hi, I'm Tilo. I'm with Microsoft. We recently joined. I'm here for the Flatcar Container Linux team, and we have a number of changes, open PRs that we'd like to get into Cluster API before the code freeze, and I'm here to get a better idea of the timeline and of the chances to get this in, and the requirements for doing so.
All right, awesome, welcome. Anyone else? If not, let's get to it. All right, Vince, you want to start us with PSAs?
Sure. So I sent that out an email. We all worked on an email, the RFC that sent the mailing list last week. Tomorrow is the 1 week time frame that this was sent, and ask folks a 2+1 if they agree with the plan. And this is kind of like our maturity release. So just to summarize, what we're trying to say here is in terms of the proposal for 1.0 is that we'll put a code freeze in effect on October 1st, and we can start working before then on the a new release branches, the beta 1 types. The goal of this is to be as close as possible as the code and the API that we have today, with minimal amount of changes. The only changes that should be identified as release blocking should probably be kind of maintenance. Something that we have identified is, for example, the contract. We might need to change that from an API version. Right now, the contract says I'm compatible with beta 1, for example, and we should probably base that on the series version, so 1.0, for example, 1.1, etc. Well, I opened an issue later today to discuss this, and there's some amendment to the roadmaps that we have to do in the book, and we'll be able to continue working on any other proposal. We'll add a breaking changes section to the CAP as well, so that each CAP will, if it comes with breaking changes, it needs to outline what kind of breaking changes these are, and if there are API breaking changes, we'll need to discuss when the new beta API is going to be worked on. Questions, comments?
Sounds good. Mike? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. And we can't hear you again.
My computer.
Yeah. Sorry. Do you want to type your question or comment in the chat maybe? Okay, great. Anyone else have any other comments or questions in the meantime? Oh, I guess Nadir put one in the chat. We were going to bump Kappa to 0.8 in October, November. Is it worth us bumping our API version to V1 Beta 1 at the same time?
Perhaps. So like we need to identify like those couple of changes that like will need to happen like for providers. We want to make for providers like this as smooth as possible, right? Like because there's going to be like a really like no API changes between Alpha 4 and Beta 1. So we want to take into account and cluster cutoff, for example, should be able to upgrade from clusters from Alpha 3 and Alpha 4 to Beta 1 directly. So I don't know yet if it's worth it to wait or not. It also depends if like, so for example, if we start working on the Beta 1 release and 1.0 release today, just as an example, and we're ready on October 1st for code free, so we don't keep backporting things, it might be worth to wait. But if it goes at the end of the month, right, it's like we might want to chat more. So I guess like depends. Yes.
Thanks.
Yassine?
Yeah, and I guess like one question. I assume this like anything related to CSI migration, if we do something, would be done on top of V1 Beta 1, not V1 Alpha 4.
That's correct. So by this proposal, Alpha 4 is only going to be supported for 6 months, starting from the Alpha release. So, and 1.0 will be supported for 1 year plus, I guess. Like, we'll decide, like, you know, like if we wanted to backport those changes or not, like on a case-by-case basis. You know, we'll work with the whole community to understand where we're at. But that work is definitely going to go first into the 1.0 branch, so the main branch first.
So question from the chat from Mike. I'm curious about code and API freeze and how that would affect the scale from 0 changes that provider might make. Example, would this API be part of 1.0 even though it is optional? So I guess the answer is pretty similar to the CSI driver question. I think in general, like this release is not meant to be an improvement on V1 Alpha 4. It's meant to be us acknowledging that we're already operating at beta, and we have been for a while, and we want to get that signal to our users. And we also want to improve our release process where we're able to do quicker, less painful releases for providers. But also not completely stop innovation and development. And there's still a lot of very important features and changes that we want to work on. So this isn't us saying this is the final release of Cluster API, everything is in there, nothing else is ever going to change. So I don't think people should worry too much about getting everything in there in the next 2 weeks. It's more like, you know, it should already be a beta. Let's just call it beta and then move on with our lives and keep working on it. Does that make sense? Cool. Any other questions or major concerns? Or minor concerns? Alberto?
Okay, so just to clarify, so we are planning to take the V1 Alpha 4 API and just promote it to beta as it is pretty much, right?
Correct.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Thilo?
Yeah, as I said in the introduction, we have a number of pending changes that have been around for a while. There have been ample discussions, and I'm pretty new to the whole special interest group, so I'm not entirely sure about the amount and the depth of code freezes that the beta release would entail, since it was mentioned that providers shouldn't be too concerned about changes as long as the API is stable. And second part of the question is, there is an API change which we proposed regarding configuration of the operating system part of instances. That's a PR on the kubeadm Bootstrap provider, in which we introduce a kind of abstraction level between the configuration and the operating system, in that you could use Cloud Init, or as we've proposed, alternatively Ignition, to configure your instances. Would that be affected? If yes, what's a good timeline there, and what can we do?
Yeah, we can take
that one.
Yeah, so for Ignition specifically, I think that PR, we just need I think we just need end-to-end tests on that. I don't know, to be honest, I don't know if we should put that behind a feature gate, given that feature gates are excluded from the code freeze. So we might want to do that instead. But just to clarify, on the feature freeze, what we're saying is for until we release 1.0, we should not merge any new groundbreaking changing code, right? For example, if someone wants to do a refactoring on the machine deploying machine set controllers, which should be refactored at some point, this is probably not the best time to do it. That's we would hold a PR until later. It's I said, we can review it with a little bit less stressful time. But yeah, this is just stopping the world temporarily as we make this bump of our API types. And then once we get there, as Cecile mentioned before, we'll continue working on all the features and additions that we want to improve. For Ignition specifically, on that PR, I would suggest to put everything behind a feature gate right now, and just pretty much block that code behind the gate, and then we can consider merging it today in Alpha 4, or we can wait also Beta 1. I'll defer to whoever kind of reviews it a little bit more. I'll do another pass, but yeah, I think the end-to-end tests are missing, so it should probably be behind a feature gate.
And I think I think we had discussed a feature gate last time, regardless. Go ahead.
It was mentioned on the PR, if I recall correctly. We've been working on completing the end-to-end tests law, so that was our current priority. So I'm very thankful for the feedback. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Awesome. Did you have any other questions?
Just of general understanding, we have a number of smaller changes in a number of providers, most significantly AWS and Azure, that then make use of that particular feature. Would those be affected by the code freeze on the 1st of October, or can those continue since they don't really entail an API change?
So I believe this code freeze we're talking about only applies to cluster API, like the CAPI code base. If providers decide to do their own code freeze, that's separate. And you'd have to bring that up with them. I don't know if Kappa would want to do one, considering if they want to do, as 0.8 directly to beta 1. In Azure, that's not something we've discussed so far, and we'd probably do it, if we were to do it, probably be after V1 beta 1 is released, so that we can do that while we're integrating. But yeah.
Yeah, we've started reaching out and working with the individual providers. So I was trying to get the big picture, and that helps a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. The other thing that we should probably talk about is, and I don't think this mentions it, is when we're targeting the end of the code freeze. So I think it might be easier to have a timeline in mind where things can resume. But in general, it would be a lot easier to have a short code freeze for everyone. And if we're not blocking on changes that we're trying to get in, that would allow us to do that and not get the code freeze, keeping the code freeze for too long.
I think usually the code freeze would last until the .0 release. So that's, I guess that's kind of what we're trying to do here. But I see a lot of plus ones on the proposal, and it seems like there isn't much pushback to do this. Quite the opposite. So we'll probably be able to start working on this beta like even today, right? It's like we just start making the release branch for 0.4 and start working on the types and all of that, and hopefully like we can keep this freeze like as short as possible and make sure that we can also like maybe do an announcement like outside of this group and the KubeCon, which is second week of October.
All right. Any other questions? Awesome. Thanks for the update, Vince. All right, let's go to discussion topics. Oh, actually, sorry, I'm skipping steps. I don't think we have any release blocking issues. Yeah, no, we're good. I guess proposals, what we discussed just changes that a little bit in the sense that unless we're planning on merging any proposals in the next week or so, we should probably put a hold on those. Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
I'm going to try this again. We'll see what happens. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, like we talked with Alex about the spot instance proposal, and I think as marked, it just needs some reviews. I think everything's cleared up there. And on the opt-in auto scaling, I think Stefan and I have worked through all the naming issues there. So I would actually love it if we could put that back into some sort of lazy consensus, if it's possible to get that merged.
Sounds good. Let me just mark that. In the meantime, do we have any other proposal authors who want to give an update? All right.
Cecile, can we mark that for lazy consensus, or is it too late in the process now, I guess?
I mean, let's mark that on the PR itself. If you feel that there's been enough review momentum and that there's no major blocking comments, I think it's fair to start it. But I would mark it in the PR. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right. Stefan, you have the first topic.
Yes, class-to-class patches again. So I got some feedback. I hopefully answered them all. And I just want to ask how we continue with the proposal. So if something like lazy consensus also makes sense. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's impacted by the beta discussion.
I think this proposal should definitely be, we should push forward the proposal and ask for more feedback. It might be worth to send an email to the list if folks haven't seen it by coming to these meetings to ask for more feedback. Given that this is adding like a lot of new code, we might, we could just say like that we wait until beta is released. Because again, like we're gonna keep that code freezes like as small as possible. This would be probably a good way to do so as well.
Okay, so this means next step, send a mail to the mailing list for more feedback.
Yeah, I want to plus one that. I think it makes sense to wait a bit, given that this is a really big and important and critical change amendment. So if we can get more eyes and, more rather than rushing it, I think that's better. Fabrizio.
No, I was just only commented that in my opinion, there is nothing controversial in that amendment. So an option could be just to merge the PR, but to wait for implementation. But if you feel that we should look for more feedback, I'm fine. Even that we are delaying it, implementation a little bit is not a problem to delay merging the amendment.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's delay the implementation no matter what, and then proposal, I guess I'll leave it up to Stefan to see if he feels there's, good enough consensus in reviewing, or if it's better to just leave it out for a bit more. Any questions? Okay, if not, Sebastian, did you need to share your screen for a demo?
Yes, please.
All right, let me give you access. Go ahead, you should be able to share.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Sebastian Geisen. I'm an engineer at Twilio SendGrid. I'm here to talk about a new provider that we are kind of working on in-house called Cluster API Provider Live. This is it's in very early development. Really the purpose of this is just to kind of get it out in front of the greater community and just kind of garner early feedback. So what this does, we run a lot of bare metal in-house, and so this is going to be for teams running Cluster API on infrastructure with longer provisioning times like bare metal. The goal of what this is kind of sets out to do is make a separation between host bootstrapping and node bootstrapping. So where host bootstrapping is like the provisioning of the physical hardware, writing of the OS, et cetera, from node bootstrapping, which would be bootstrapping QADM, et cetera. And this is really in service of making those node bootstrapping tasks faster for teams working with Metal. So kind of jump right into it. So if you're using Cluster API with bare metal, you're using a reference architecture like this. This is a reference architecture of Cluster API Metal 3. And so essentially what's going to happen is there's machine templates that are under the control of a controller. And when a host, when a provisioning event happens, for example, an MD or a QADM control plane is scaled up, that results in creation of machines that are satisfied by, in this case, Metal 3 machines. That will essentially pick a bare metal host and start this provisioning process. And this provisioning process is kind of what I want to expand on here in this next slide. So when we're provisioning bare metal, there's really two main kind of phases to this. We're provisioning the host, so we have to pixie boot it. We have to boot through any BMC subsystems, any lifecycle controllers, et cetera. A lot of times we're going to be pixie booting the node, provisioning the OS via either something like Kickstart or Precede, and then finally bootstrapping with QADM. On hardware, this can be a very long-running process, often requiring two reboots, one to Pixie and then one to boot into the provisioned OS. This can also be very opaque. If you, from an operator standpoint, you're basically you're scaling up an MD, and then there's a lot of things that happen due to the fact that that provisioning basically starts at that lifecycle event once the machine gets created. So it can be a lot, if something goes wrong, a lot of times we're in the situation of your machine just won't show up for 15 or 20 minutes. And due to the fact that there's so many things that happen within that provisioning cycle, it can be kind of difficult to kind of attempt to triage that just due to so many things kind of happening. So what we're kind of setting out to do is to separate the host provisioning from the node provisioning. So effectively what we want to do is be able to kind of front end load a lot of the host provisioning and be able to kind of handle those longer provisioning tasks sort of on hardware in batch. We install a small agent onto the machine that then basically gets added to the management cluster as an inventory of almost like hot standby spares. Then when a consuming cluster has a machine that needs to be facilitated with a provider, only the agent essentially can just execute the QADM provisioning tasks by reading out of for example, like the QADM template. Which basically takes the node provisioning time, meaning the time from scaling up your MD to the time your node actually shows up in the cluster, down from 15-20 minutes in our case to less than 1 minute. So really the goal is to kind of really decrease that node provisioning time once that lifecycle event is triggered. So here's kind of the core components that this controller or that this controller suite is comprised of. So it's going to be a host controller. This can work with multiple backends. Right now, our supported backend is Metal 3. Essentially, what this does is it provisions a certificate in cluster for each agent, and then provisions in this case a bare metal host, and installs the OS, performs all that configuration, and then adds a hook to install a little live agent. This is listening via like an authenticated API from the controller. And so when we have a live agent controller that's basically here just communicating with these agents, doing things like health checks, reconciling agent state, etc. Then we have a live machine controller. So this is when we have a consuming cluster. So for example, we scale up an MD, that's going to result in the creation of a machine from a machine set. And so we are going to, that machine will have an infrastructure reference of a live machine and a QADM config, which essentially contains instructions for how to bootstrap QADM. So in a init, this would contain instructions for how to perform essentially a QADM init. In most other cases, it's going to be essentially like a QADM join. So our live machine controller, when it's reconciling these machines, what it's going to do is it's going to pick an available agent. It will read the QADM config from its corresponding machine and send an authenticated request over to that agent, which will then just execute the QADM config components. Then after, if that is successful, it'll link that agent to the live machine, and effectively that completes that reconciliation. The agents have various lifecycle states. So this provides kind of a nice interface for us, because basically the live machine controller, as it is sending these QADM commands over to the agent, can inject hooks, so that can basically be run while state transitions. So this gives us some initial or some additional sort of interfaces for configuring sort of lifecycle tasks. Obviously, QADM, like a QADM config gives us things like pre-QADM commands and post-QADM commands, but with this we can now sort of have additional hooks injected into that as well. So we can do, for example, like pre and post deprovisioning, which today is a kind of difficult to hook into in a lot of cases. All these requests are sent to the agent by the controller, and the agent is essentially verifying the client authentication. So it's essentially only executing commands that it can verify are authenticated with the certificate from the cluster controller that provisioned it. So kind of putting all that back together, what we have in practice is something that essentially looks like this. So this looks very similar to our existing sort of cluster API provider Metal 3 example from earlier. We've just swapped all the machine infrastructure providers over to live machines away from Metal 3 machines. And so essentially when we scale up our machine deployment and that lifecycle event gets triggered, the live machine controller is just going to pick an available live agent, and that live agent's only going to have to run the kubeadm bootstrapping as opposed to have to do a full provision. And this this is very helpful to us in that it sort of makes that process a lot faster. So here, let me launch my demo here. I have to stop sharing and reshare my terminal. This text is a bit bigger. Okay, so over here on the left side, we have a single a consumer cluster. So this is just a kind of run-of-the-mill workload cluster that's just has a single control plane. On the right pane here, we're in our management cluster where we've provisioned a number of live agents. So most of these are in just like a ready idle state. You can see one of these live agents has been consumed and provisioned as the first control plane node of our cluster over here. So let's go ahead and scale up an MD and add a couple of Ceph nodes to this cluster, and we'll see what happens here. So once we scale that cluster, we see here that our agents are transitioning. Our live machine controller has started reconciling the new created live machines. It has selected 2 agents that are matching the selector criteria from the parent machine deployment, and is now running that pre-provisioning hook. And you can see here that these are now sort of joining the cluster. So it's finished the pre-provisioning hook, and these have now joined, entered kind of a ready state. And when we look back over here at these agents, we can see that these are now transitioned to a provision state. It can be a little bit difficult to appreciate if you haven't worked with Metal, because ordinarily this would be a 15 to 20 minute process from the time of like scaling up your MD to actually like seeing nodes pop into the cluster. And so this is a fairly dramatic improvement just for cases where, for example, you may have a node die unexpectedly. You need to replace that. Well, if it takes 20 minutes to replace that node, you may have encumbered workloads or for the duration of that time, and other customer impact may be a result of that. And we kind of see the same thing. We can the same process sort of happens in reverse. So if we scale this replica set back down, these agents will enter a deprovisioning state. Once deprovisioning completes, they'll go back to pending, and then they'll essentially they'll re-register where this can be a place where you can, for example, inject hooks to do system cleans, wipe disks, set the system back to a base state, and just provides a nice sort of additional interface for configurability there. That's really that's most of what I wanted to show. Again, we're still in very early development. I know that there's been some discussion on sort of ways of decoupling sort of that host OS provisioning from the node provisioning. So I thought this may be a sort of an appropriate topic to sort of bring up to that end. And really was sort of want to make sure that since this is in sort of the early phases of development, that we're not really doing anything or heading in a direction that might kind of bring us into conflict with future initiatives from this SIG kind of going forward. The intention would be to continue development on this, and ideally do whatever we need to do to get it adopted as like an official provider, whatever that process may look like.
Awesome.
So yeah, thank you very much, everybody.
All right, Lubomir, you have a question?
That's an excellent demo. I'm assuming some of the lights of those hardware pieces are blinking really fast to get this working. No, I have a general concern here, which is my assumption is that potentially the separation between machine bootstrapping and kubeadm, or Kate's node bootstrapping, if you will, is going to have to be supporting core cluster API. So instead of creating this separate new provider, it feels like it should be something that is supported in core.
We're open to helping with the development of that, by the way.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so the concern is whether we should, allocate the repository for this provider before core supports it, or should we, keep it on your side and potentially start adding the changes in core? That is basically the repository organization question.
Right. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to begin answering that. But yeah, that we're absolutely open to kind of getting this functionality in. I mean, we really just want the functionality, and we want to expose it to other folks. So whether that be via sort of additions to the core, or via the addition of sort of a separate standalone provider, I think we'd be fine with either of those outcomes.
Yeah, I think my personal preference would be to have this in core and don't have this yet another provider. It feels like if we have it in core, everybody's going to consume it, and the provider is potentially you can keep it as experimental or even usable on your side. I mean, that's my opinion at least.
Vince?
Yeah, so there's two avenues of that, like probably like I need to approach like at the same time. So KPK as a bootstrap provider does definitely a lot of things at the same time. So 5124, which Stefano pointed out in chat, like it's the issue that I think you folks from Twilio totally open, right? Which is like, hey, we want the format to actually just be QBDM output, like we don't want anything else. This could be like a pretty easy additive change, like in KPK today. We need to like kind of address like some requirements on that. Like for example, if we do have like plain QBDM type, we need to make sure to block the fields in the validation webhook that like won't be able to do anything, right? It's like to inform the users. And then, so that's one side of the equation. It's like make sure that the current provider can just output QBDM types. Then there is separating the code a little bit in KPK and cleaning it up over time to make sure that it's a little bit more like separated, I guess, like from OS bootstrapping, so Cloud Init, and then the QBDM parts of it. And then there is the proposal that we were discussing last time, which is if we do separate OS and Kubernetes bootstrap it, could we have the machine types and the machine templates and so on, expose these types directly in Cluster API, and so have QBDM types and Ignition or Cloud Init to be more bad as included and not like a complete different bootstrap provider. So there is a bunch of different things that we probably need to discuss, but I think that probably a good first step would be to add support for the plain format in KPK.
Yeah, and I think we would love help with like starting to think about the proposal and the requirements for separating things out, since like you've been looking at that area very closely. You might have some good input there. Lubomir?
Some of the changes, Vince, that you explained, would any of those will be breaking changes after V1 beta 1? No?
No, they should all be backward compatible. Yeah, I don't see any breaking changes because we do want still to allow like any other any company that's or like person that's using a Cluster API to replace the whole bootstrapping process if they want to. We don't want to be too prescriptive, but we do want to improve the user experience at the same time. So there's just some trade-off there, and we'll make sure to make that backward compatible.
I see. So Nadir is saying that these providers can still exist as a separate repository until we have these changes in core. So like I said, I don't have a strong opinion. If others want to see that, we can proceed that route.
Nadir?
Yeah, no. So I think CAPL is still a provider in the sense that, you know, it works with existing provisioned machines. That is a provider. The way it interacts with the machine and gets information onto those is its own provider in much the same way as the Azure and AWS are provided. So it's still an infra provider of some sort. What I mean is, you know, if we can get the raw Kubedium format, then that's a much better consumption model for CAPL.
Hey, Sebastian, I'm just curious, right now, how are you getting the demo working? Are you doing some sort of parsing of the Kubedium config, or are you writing your own provider?
Yes, so our agent, it's basically able to parse the Kubedium config. So yeah, what we want to do in the future is, you know, move to a different format. So we're essentially kind of we're supporting that format, but that's probably not the best user experience, and it would be a good place for something like a raw format, or if we wanted to support something like Ignition going forward, could be updated to support those formats as well.
Got it. Fabrizio?
First of all, thanks for the demo. We should have more demos in this meeting because they are always fun and interesting. Second, I think that given that as it was clarified, Sebastian clarified, this is in early stage, I think that the major concern for this team is to make this possible, so to remove all the blocker or put in place all the extensibility points that are required, and then we will discuss code organization when it is time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's still a lot of work for us to do on our end. We need to, you know, make sure we have end-to-end tests and all the other sort of conformance items, which absolutely we'll be working on in the coming weeks as well. So looking forward to to continuing on that adoption process.
Awesome. One question I had was for the live part of it, what decides like how many agents are on standby? Is that like depending on your hardware available, or is there some sort of formula?
It's yeah. So right now we're basing off of just labeled. We're using again like bare metal hosts on a Metal 3 implementation right now. So we're using bare metal hosts. So we have a reconciler that will effectively take any BMHs that have a particular label. Basically, are reserved for agents will be provisioned from those. There's been a little bit of talk around maybe adding an additional type for like an agent pool or something similar that could kind of kick these off automatically. But we're in such an early phase that it's just very, very, very basic right now.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for the demo. It was really great. And yeah, looking forward to the guitar demo from Fabrizio next time. All right, let's keep going because we have 2 more topics and a bit less than 15 minutes left. So yeah, actually, Fabrizio, you have the next topic, Kubedium.
Yeah, this is an update from the Kubernetes meeting that just finished. So also in Kubernetes, we are starting discussion about graduating our types to V1 beta, to V1 in this case. And the reason are almost the same, the in CAPI. So the API are there. We are already providing higher level guarantees. The things are used in production. And so, yeah, we started this discussion in the CAPI meeting. But what is really important is to get feedback from this community and from everyone is using cluster API. And the next step that we are planning is to send an email to the mailing list. Then we will plan for an API review, for a Kubernetes API review to check if there could be some improvement. We are also doing a focused backlog grooming, so only focused to API changes issue. And the result of this screening will be to identify things that we consider blocking for graduating or not. So the ask to this team is if you have some expectations, some requests to forward to the Kubadmin team, this is the right time.
Livamir?
One particularly important topic for me, at least, is going to be what are we going to do if some of our APIs, such as the KubeADM API or the Cluster API graduates to V1, and whether we're going to establish a recommendation that the API is set in stone and no incremental changes should happen to it, and a new API version should be released instead, such as V2. And this is almost like a SIG-wide discussion, and I would like for us to have it in the next SIG Lifecycle meeting, which is next Tuesday. It also obviously affects Cluster API, what you're going to do with the future types. And yeah, it's counterintuitive to what core Kubernetes is doing, at least the core package, but I think it's important for us to have this discussion. It has a variety of different impacts on the consumer base.
Any questions from anyone? I guess one question I have is there was some discussion in the past, I remember, about some of the add-ons that are installed as part of KubeADM to be a bit more flexible and possibly leveraging operators through the cluster add-ons project or something like that to be able to change things like the core DNS deployment, because right now it's pretty rigid. Has there been any movement in that direction, or is that considered? Fabrizio.
Yeah, the idea original was to wait for the add-on project. So we have to sync up again with them, or we have to decide if to provide a, let me say, another solution. But I think that as we are discussing for Cluster API, the point is the same. So this is a label. Graduating to V1 is not stopping evolution of the project. It is just a declaration of the maturity that we have. But definitely we should ask ourselves if this is something that for us block graduation or not.
Agreed, but I would say V1 is a bit different than V1 beta 1 in terms of maturity, right? Livamir?
Yes, and in particular, the core DNS example is a good one because we have core DNS related fields inside the current maturity level of the KubeADM API. And if, for example, we decide to stop managing core DNS inside this API and move it to an operator, this will be a breaking change to the same API. So the whole add-on discussion is part of what we are going to try to cover in some of these KubeADM meetings, in the SIG meeting, potentially discuss like what are we going to do about it. My personal preference right now is to completely stop managing add-ons the way we are managing the add-ons today, which hard coding them. But also the operator add-on concept is really mature, unfortunately. And also Justin Santa Barbara found some RBAC related problems to it. So I don't think we can consider some of these things strictly blockers. At the same time, obviously we need discussion. Like the way we currently recommend to users to not install core DNS and kubeproxy is to basically skip the phase that is doing that. And after that, they basically can install whatever they want, maybe a custom core DNS operator or something else. Pretty much that's the best we can do.
I see. I think, yeah, Fabrizio, Vince, and Maria, maybe it'd be good to discuss add-ons and the add-ons project in one of the next SIG meetings, because that's something that also for Cluster API, we're kind of, blocked on in terms of CSI driver stuff and things like that. So maybe it's something we need to focus on as a SIG.
We can also to get them to join the Cluster API the SIG Cluster Lifecycle meeting, because the add-ons project has not been given updates to us in a while.
Yeah, it might be good to give them a heads up in advance to see if they can make it.
Makes sense.
Cool. All right. Last topic, Alex, KubeMark provider.
Yeah, so basically I'm just looking for more context here, since I see some of the contributors for that particular provider here in a meeting. I see that the repository is currently archived. I was wondering as to the reasons. So I see a related PR that we sort of providing support for hollow nodes for Docker provider, but I was wondering about a use case when we wanted to test new features on a bare metal cluster and just simulate large fleet of workers for it. Or let's say, in our case for KubeVirt provider, we want to create a control plane running on KubeVirt, but we still want to simulate, let's say, hundreds of nodes with KubeMark. So what is the alternative, or what is the way to achieve that without KubeMark provider?
Right.
I didn't necessarily have a response to how you would do it without the KubeMark provider. And I would defer to Fabrizio for kind of the bigger action on moving it. I just think on that archived repo, like I had gone there to put another PR and to adjust the README so that it pointed to the new location, and it got archived before I got a chance to do that. So I think we should probably try to unarchive that and put that last PR update in there, just to point people to where the new stuff is going to be. So sorry, that doesn't really answer Alex's question.
Well, thanks, Mike. It answers just in part that there is a new location for the live code, as opposed to looking at the archived one.
We need to merge Fabrizio's PR to get it, kind of officially as part of our repo. But the idea here was that originally we had created that, Ben Moss had created that separate KubeMark provider repo. And then we had decided kind of as a community that we thought the KubeMark provider was valuable enough that it should be part of our testing infrastructure, because I mean, it's going to have a lot of extended testing effects. I know, like, from my perspective, there's a lot of cluster auto scaling testing that I'm trying to get to that's going to be dependent on that KubeMark provider as well. Unfortunately, I think we kind of ground to a halt in that PR, but it would be great to get it merged at some point in the near future so we could have it as an official provider. I think we're just in the last stages of kind of getting it working and getting it in there.
Fabrizio?
Yeah, I'm not aware why the repo was archived. I think that, at least from my point of view, the situation is the following. We create a repo for a new provider, but then Ben changed basically his work. So the activity got kind of stuck. And I tried to revive this effort, but basically, I don't have enough bandwidth to make it basically a separate provider, take care of all the scaffolding that a provider has. And so I proposed to merge it into CapD, which is the testing provider that we have. So we can have the functionality of all nodes without, let me say, the overload to maintain a separate provider. It was a kind of way forward to keep this idea going, but yeah, the PR is still there.
Right, did you still have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just it's funny. The timing is funny because coincidentally, at the same time that Fabrizio had put up the PR into the Cappy repo, just the previous week, I had gotten some bandwidth to work on the KubeMark provider. So I had started to put a PR up into the KubeMark provider, repo. And then more recently it got archived. So I guess it's curious to hear, from Fabrizio. Yeah. If you don't know why it got archived, yeah, then I guess it would have been nice to keep it open until we were able to have the new PR in place. So maybe we could unarchive it just to kind of update what's going on there or something. But I do have some bandwidth to work on this, and I'd like to help get that PR, finished. I'm just having trouble getting it actually working on my Fedora machines. I've been trying to replicate them on Ubuntu machines now, and that's kind of where I'm at. But yeah, I think it'd be great if we could get that PR merged.
I recall that we discussed the archival during the Sequest Lifecycle meeting as one of our inactive projects. And we do that periodically. If we have one maintainer that no longer works on it, nobody's setting code to this, we just archive it. If you want to unarchive it, I think we have an open DM, me, Vince, and I guess Justin and someone who is from the GitHub team. Vince, do you like to tell them that we can unarchive this provider, or what is your position on this topic?
Honestly, I wouldn't want to recommend until there's a set of people that they can maintain it, over time. So if folks maybe we should actually bring that conversation in public and CC everybody that's interested in, given that was a DM thread with Bobby Tables, right? Mr. Bobby Tables. Bob Killen.
I mean, I know we had discussed it in this meeting about, kind of like we wanted to move away from having that cloud provider as a separate repo. And I think we had agreed on that as a group. But, to me, it was just a little shocking because I had a PR open there to update the KubeMark repo with the latest, Cappy stuff. And then, and obviously there was no movement happening there. But, Ben had kind of passed that off to me, and I was willing to keep doing it there. And I think we should have, at least until the point we have the PR merged in cluster API. But I'm happy to follow whatever the best guidance here is now. I think we should unarchive it, at least just to point people, to the cluster API work that's happening.
I've tried to look for the issue that we logged for the archival, but I cannot find it. But I'm pretty sure someone from Cappy agreed about this archival. I did not make the decision.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it was probably me and I'm just forgetting about it.
Well, maybe Fabrizio or someone else. I don't remember who exactly.
No, we agreed on archiving CapD, the separator report for CapD and CapBK. But when we discussing archiving the KubeMark provider at SIG meeting, we basically repeated what we are saying, that there is still no clear discussion, no clear direction, even if there are no activities. So please keep it around again. So it is a surprise for me.
That's what I recall too.
Yeah, Vince, I guess you can try to talk to Mr. Bobby Tables about this. I mean, the cluster API maintainer should decide what to do with this provider, I guess.
Let's move this into the channel. We're 2 minutes past.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, folks.
See you all online. Bye.